Today I'm doing a valve lash on my 6.7 Cummins. It's got about 130,000 miles on it. I saw some videos on YouTube, but no one really showed right from the beginning what you do. So at this point, you're first going to take off your plastic cover, and that's just 8mm bolts here, 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 and then there's 2 in the back, and then down this side as well. Once you get your plastic cover off, then you're just going to pull the CCV filter housing. I'm just going to pull that right off. There's no bolts for that, and you'll be looking like this. All right, the next thing you're going to do is there's a couple plugs and barbed oil lines. You just kind of have to wiggle these off. They take a little bit. There's this one here and this one as well. This plug here, there's a little clip pretty much. You're just gonna push that in and slide it up. There's another one just like it. It goes right there. And this one here, there's a little red tab. You slide that over and then you'll slide this over and then you'll push this down and pull it right out. After that, you're gonna start loosening your bolts. There's 2 there, 2 there, and 2 way back there. So these are all the bolts you take out. These 2 are just for a bracket. They're extra. They're not really needed. Since that was just holding part of the EGR on. These are all the bolts that came out. They're all at 10mm. The back 2 were a little difficult, but I just used a 1/4" drive ratchet since it was smaller to get back in there with the low socket. And then once you pull that off, you kind of have to pry it up because it's going to want to hang up here. These 2 both wanted to come up together, this and this gasket. So you got to watch because you don't want to tear these wires out. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to be careful and take all these off. So that way you can pull the rest of this gasket out and then you'll be able to start adjusting your valves. All right, now that you pull the rest of that gasket off, last thing is all those nuts stay connected to those wires, so you don't have to worry about them dropping down in off your injector. Next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna wanna move your harmonic balancer, try to get some light in here. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be harder to see from the top, so you do it from the bottom. You wanna get that top dead center, and then we'll see if it's on cylinder 1 or cylinder 6. I'm going to try to start with cylinder 1, so I'm going to spin it here and see where we're at, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I climb onto here. The easiest thing to do is take these bolts out. They're 1/2" nuts, so you just break them loose with the wrench. That way you can get a little bit more room in there. There's your harmonic balancer. And you can use a 5/8 with a breaker bar. This is what I got going on here. It's a 3/8. And you're just gonna spin it so that way you can see where your top dead center is. I'll mark that with a paint marker. Now you're gonna spin that back up to top dead center, and then we'll check to see what stroke we're on. All right, so I got it the top dead center. And of course, knowing your luck, cylinder 1's tight, so I'm on the wrong stroke. So now I'm going to go down there and spin it another 360 degrees. The reason why I know I'm on the wrong stroke is because it's rocker 6. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but it's pretty loose. This is my first time doing it, so I want to start on cylinder 1 just because I can see better where I'm at. It'll just make it easier in the long run. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark with a different color paint marker on the bottom, so I know where 180 is. So that way when I know when I'm getting close, I'm going to keep bouncing from under the truck and then back up top. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to mark bottom at 180, spin it at 360, and then we'll be starting with cylinder 1. All right, so we spun it 360 degrees. Sorry, it's not wanting to focus here. There's top dead center up top. So now we know that our intake on cylinder 1 is going to be loose. And cylinder 6 should be tight, unless it's real bad. They're tight. So that's good. So now that we're here, we can adjust the valves on the intake side on cylinder 1, 2, and 4. And exhaust will be cylinder 1, 3, and 5. So I'm gonna use my feeler gauges here. We'll start with the intake side. This is gonna be a 14 millimeter lock nut and a 5 millimeter Allen key to adjust it. So I'm gonna get those tools out, and I'll try to set up the phone here and at least show you how to do the first one. And I'll run down through. I'm gonna hit a paint marker on the rocker so I know it's done. And then we'll come back and we'll rotate harmonic balancer 360 degrees, do the same thing. And then after that, we're gonna rotate it a couple times, probably like 3 or 4, and then recheck it to make sure everything's still in spec, and then we'll pretty much be done from there. All right, so we're gonna start on our intake side here. Your smaller rockers are your intake, your larger ones are your exhaust. Your exhaust are also gonna line up with your manifold. So we're gonna break loose our 14 mil lock nut that's on there. These are super tight. There we go. We got that broken loose. And then you can use your 5 mil Allen to adjust this. So I'm gonna stick in here. I bent my feeler gauge because it's definitely a lot easier to get in. And from what I've seen, you want just a little bit of drag to get it correct. So right there is too much, doesn't want to move. There's just a little bit, there's too much. So that's very fine adjustment. Right there seems about good. So now that that's in, I'm going to tighten them up with a 14 mil wrench. That way I could keep my Allen key on there, so it's not spinning my adjustment at the same time I'm just trying to tighten the lock nut. Later on we'll go through and torque them once we recheck everything. So we got this on here. Check it here one more time. So we're loose. Too much. Seems right about there is where I want to be. Hold this here. All right, tighten this up. All right. I want to call the dealer here later today. Actually get a quote on how much this would cost to do. So that way you guys know how much you're actually going to save. I got a quote from a smaller shop. Probably about a year ago, because I knew this was coming up, and I think he said about $360 to $400. So I'll call the actual dealer so you kind of guys have an idea on the high side of what this would cost. But so far, a little bit of basic knowledge doesn't really seem too difficult. I can see maybe the cylinder 6, maybe cylinder 5 might be a little difficult, just because of that firewall and how far back it goes. But we'll get it figured out here. There's your first one. So now that your intake's done, now we could do the exhaust. So for your exhaust, you're going to be right around 26 thousandths. There is a range in the spec book. This is kind of the middle ground. So 26 thousandths is where we're going to shoot for. So basically you're going to do the same thing. I'm going to get my 26 thous feeler gauge out. Might give me a minute here. Back here. This seems extremely loose, but we'll see. Yeah, there's a good bit of play on that one. So this time, I'm gonna set my wrench already on there, because I know with taking a video, it's a little bit easier. Just do it here all at once. Get this back in here. Make this a little easier, you might want to buy better feeler gauges. I just got these at Harbor Freight. They're $5. But I'm young and broke, so. Seems a little loose. Sorry. Right there's too much. See, it doesn't want to come back out. Right there's a little drag. We're just going to leave that there and tighten this up. I'm gonna redo that one. It seems a little loose still. It's definitely too much. It's crazy the amount of movement you can get here with just a very small amount of turn. You guys keep falling. Not really a good spot to put a phone in the engine bay. I don't want to drop it. I'm liking that. I'm gonna tighten this up. Has a little bit of bite, not too much. So we'll start with that. We are going to go back through later and check it before we torque it down. So that's basically all we're going to do. Like I said, I would recommend getting better feeler gauges. They're kind of not the best. I'm also trying not to drop my phone down in the engine bay. So I'm going to go down through here, do all these. And I'll kind of come back after that's done, and then we'll rotate the harmonic again 360 degrees, and we'll be doing the next set. All right, so I finished on stroke with the cylinder 1. I adjusted the intake and exhaust. For intake would be cylinder 1, 2, and 4. Exhaust is 1, 3, and 5. Now I rotate it 360 degrees. I can tell we're on cylinder 6 stroke because the intake and exhaust are both loose, and then one intake and exhaust is tight. So now that you do that, once you're on this stroke, for intake you're going to do cylinder 3, 5, and 6. And for exhaust, it's going to be 2, 4, and 6. So I'm going to go through and adjust these. It's the same specs. 10 thous on intake and 26 thous on exhaust. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust all these. I'm going to start with 6. I'll kind of come back and let you know how bad that one is. 5 didn't go too bad. For the exhaust side, I just had to switch from a T handle to like your standard Allen key. These are all the tools I'm using, but this works great for the ones you can easily accessible. And then back in the back, I've just been switching to that. Good thing there's only 2 back there, otherwise this would take a lot more time. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and then I'll let you guys know. All right, so I've completed all the valve adjustments here on stroke 6. And again, that would be intake 3, 5, and 6, and exhaust 2, 4, and 6. So they do get easier as you go. You kind of learn what you're looking for in terms of feel. Cylinder 6, it wasn't too bad. Exhaust side was a little harder, just because of the lighting, you can't really see. But if you kind of have experience with working on stuff, I really don't think it's this bad of a job. But I'm not, from a mechanic standpoint, I come from, I'm a welder, but I also done some millwright work, so I do have, you know, knowledge of tearing stuff apart and putting it back together. Hopefully you can hear me over that helicopter. But now I'm going to do 2 rotations on the crank, or the harmonic balancer. Recheck all of them on stroke 6, and then after that I'll probably do, I guess it would be 3 rotations to get back to stroke on cylinder 1. And then I'll recheck all of those just to make sure they're still good. And then I gotta figure out what the torque spec is. I'm gonna torque all that down, and then we'll start putting everything back together. All right, so I rechecked all those. The only one that came a little loose was exhaust on cylinder 2. I'll just put that back into spec quick. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna torque the stroke on this one, and then give it another rotation, do the same thing, check, and then torque those. So the torque spec for this is 18 foot-pounds on the lock nut. So I'm going to torque intake 3, 5, and 6, and exhaust 2, 4, and 6, and then give the engine another rotation, and check the stroke for cylinder 1. All right, so I double checked all my valves on stroke 1. I think I only had one that was a little loose, so I tightened that one up. And then I torqued all those down to 18 foot-pounds. So I grabbed my valve cover gasket, I guess if you want to call that a gasket, put that back on. I did take a picture of the wiring before I took it apart, just to verify that it's going to the right side of each injector. It shouldn't really move. They seem pretty stiff whenever you pull it off, but this is definitely something you want to double check. So last thing I want to do here is, I believe the torque spec for these nuts that go on these injectors are like 11 inch-pounds. So let's have a 1/4 inch drive ratchet. I think it's 8 mil. I'm just gonna pretty much like finger snug them. Probably something like that until it gets tight. You don't want to overdo that. If you do, you'll be buying new injectors, and if you don't have deep pockets, that's definitely something you don't want to do. But it could give you an excuse to tell your old lady to get some 100% overs. So if you do want to overdo it for that, you go ahead, but it's not in my budget right now. So yep. All right, so we some people call it rocker box, valve cover, whatever you want to call it. After we tighten all those wiring down, slid that on, and then the 6 bolts here, they get torqued to 18 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna torque those in, and then after that, I'll be connecting my lines back and the 3 plugs that you unplugged when taking it off. And after that, you put your CCV on, which I'll show you then, which that just sits on there, and then the plastic cover going over it, we'll go over that and gets bolted down, and then you'll be done. All right, so I torqued this down to 18 foot-pounds. I was reading some forums. It looks like most people suggest starting in the center and then work your way out. Well, I did center, then the back 2, then the front 2. That way I guess it would seat properly in the center instead of pulling everything down and then flexing it back. So then, yep, that literally just slides on there. And then we'll be putting my cover back on. And then I still have all my bolts in it. Throw that on, tighten them down, and we'll be done. All right, I got that bolted up. Last thing here, double check, make sure all your electrical connections and your 2 oil feeds are on. And if you did loosen your fan cover, make sure you put those nuts back on before you start it. And that's the job complete. Next thing I'll be doing is oil change, because it's due and I got the valves adjusted, so I might as well put fresh oil in it. But let me know if there's anything else you want to see, or if there's any other questions. So you can see I did the valve lash at 137,000. Make sure it's at neutral. Moment of truth. Look at that. Definitely a lot quieter. I'll run for a bit here and see if it leaks at all. Besides that, that's it.